The trunk was a coffin of steel. Inside, Cole Mercer's chest heaved in ragged waves, each inhale burning like fire, each exhale thinner than the last. His wrists bled against duct tape, ribs screaming with every twitch. The stench of rust and sweat pressed against his skin until the air itself felt poisoned. A single badge glimmered faintly in the dark, cracked, bent, but still recognizable, proof of a uniform that had become a trap. The world outside was muffled, a symphony of silence broken only by his shallow gasps. In that smothering dark, he knew betrayal had brought him here. Once, the badge had opened doors and inspired trust. Now it was nothing more than a token of broken loyalty. Each thought of his pulse warned him of the truth. No one was coming. And if he closed his eyes, the darkness would never release him. Far across the junkyard, a child trudged through frost and fog with a sack too heavy for her shoulders. Lila Cross was 6, though her thin frame looked younger, sharpened by hunger and sleepless nights. Her second-hand coat sagged at the seams, boots split at the toes, letting in cold with every step. In one hand, she gripped the strap of her bag. In the other, the warmth of survival. The thick neck fur of Ash, her shepherd mix, padding faithfully at her side. Metal clinked with each piece of scrap she collected, the sound as familiar as a lullaby. To her, the rusting aisles of cars were not a graveyard, but a marketplace, a place where copper wire became bread and empty cans bought medicine for the woman waiting at home. Each day was the same, but tonight the fog seemed heavier, like the junkyard itself was holding its breath.
Mist slithered low between the gutted frames of sedans, shrouding broken glass and twisted metal. The junkyard was a cathedral of ruin, its towers built from stacked vehicles, windows staring blank like blind eyes. Every creak of shifting steel carried like a warning. Lila's boots scraped the dirt in soft rhythm, her small body disappearing into vapor with each step. Ash moved ahead, his ears twitching at sounds no child could hear. Somewhere above, a crow beat its wings, vanishing into gray. The air smelled of oil and damp earth, thick enough to coat the throat. It was a place people avoided, unless desperation dragged them here. For Lila, desperation was survival. But tonight, the silence pressed too tightly, and even Ash's steady presence could not disguise the unease. The fog was not merely drifting, it was watching, curling through every gap as if waiting for something to break. The bag on her shoulder rattled with scavenged cans as she bent near a rusted sedan, prying at a frozen scrap of wire. Ash stopped suddenly, muscles stiff, nose tilted into the mist. His growl rumbled low, faint but certain. Lila froze, her small hand still gripping the wire. Then she heard it, not the whisper of wind, but a sound from inside metal. Faint, a scrape, a knock, almost like fingernails dragging against steel. Her chest tightened. The junkyard was cruel, but not haunted. Yet the noise came again, deliberate, desperate. She turned toward a sagging black sedan near the edge of the yard, its windows cracked, paint corroded, frames sunken on flat tires. Beneath the silence, someone, breathed inside. Fear clutched her, but hunger had taught her patience, and patience had taught her courage. One more step, and the mystery could no longer be ignored.
Her fingers, raw from cold, tugged at the latch until rust screamed against rust. The trunk creaked open, exhaling the stench of blood and sweat. Inside, curled in pain, was a man in a torn police uniform. Duct tape cutting his wrists raw, bruises spread across his face in purple blooms. His chest rose shallowly, a body clinging to breath. Beside him, another shape shifted, a massive shepherd, black and tan, its fur matted with grime, one leg bound in a crude, blood-soaked wrap. Its amber eyes snapped open, sharp and alive, fixing on the child at the opening. For a moment, the world held still. The battered officer, the wounded dog, and the scavenger girl staring down into a coffin that was not empty. The dog's growl trembled between warning and plea, and in that moment, the fog thickened, sealing the four of them inside a fragile secret. Ash lunged forward, growl cutting sharp through the silence. Titan, the larger shepherd in the trunk, bared his teeth, body trembling but still powerful. For an instant, it was predator against predator, eyes locked in primal suspicion. But then Titan shifted, lowering his head, his amber gaze flicking toward Leela. Ash growled softer, ears twitching, his stance shifting from challenge to shield. Both dogs, battered and hungry, aligned not against each other, but around the girl. The man's eyes cracked open, swollen lids dragging heavy over pale irises. His lips moved, dry and broken. The faintest whisper escaped before darkness claimed him again. A single word bled into the cold air, heavy with betrayal. Voss. Leela's chest trembled. She had heard the name and whispers of the town, a shadow wrapped in a badge. Now it echoed from the lips of a man left for dead inside a trunk.
The officer's torn shirt carried a smear of blue, his badge scratched nearly beyond recognition, numbers glinting faintly in fractured light. To Leela, badges meant order, authority, men who barked commands in the streets. But here, the badge was rusted hope, twisted into a mark of failure. She traced the name in her mind, Cole Mercer. Not just any man, an officer once spoken of with respect, now reduced to a captive breathing shallow in a junkyard coffin. And the name he rasped, Voss, clung heavier than the fog. Betrayal wore a badge too. Ash pressed closer to her leg, Titan's labored breaths filling the trunk. Leela thought of Evelyn's words, sharp as scripture. Knots are cages, and cages can be undone. Her thin hands tightened. She would not leave him bound, not leave the dog bleeding. Survival had no mercy, but loyalty demanded she try. Her grandmother's voice came like a whisper in her chest. Evelyn Cross, frail but unbroken, had taught her that the world may forget them, but they must never forget themselves. Hunger had carved her bones, cold had hollowed her cheeks, yet those words held her straighter than any meal. Leela's knees dug into gravel as she pried at the duct tape with trembling fingers. Her small body braced the trunk lid open while Titan watched, his breath hot against her wrist. Ash paced at her back, ears tilted toward every shift of the fog. The officer groaned faintly, ribs rising and falling with ragged protest, but she did not stop. Each scrape of her fingers against rough tape was a vow. The world wanted her silent, forgotten, but her grandmother's voice told her otherwise. Knots were pages, and cages, no matter how cruel, could always be undone.
When the tape tore loose, Cole's hands shook, with blood rushing back. Titan stumbled from the trunk, his wounded paw buckling under weight. Leela pressed her thin shoulder beneath the officer's arm, bearing weight far greater than she should. Ash trotted ahead, his tail stiff, ears pivoting toward unseen dangers. The procession moved slow, fragile, but forward. The fog seemed to shift with them, swallowing sound, turning each breath into a trespass. Every few steps, Cole's knees buckled, ribs stabbing sharp under bruised flesh. Titan limped close, pressing his massive shoulder into his partner's leg as if refusing surrender. Leela's breath rasped, frost escaping her lips, but she did not falter. She was carrying not just a man and a dog, but a promise, a thread connecting her hunger, her grandmother's voice, and the fragile spark of loyalty flickering in the broken bodies beside her. Halfway through the aisles of stacked cars, the mist shifted unnaturally. It moved not with wind, but with purpose, thicker in waves, swallowing corners and opening paths like a living thing. Ash halted, hackles high, growling into the gray. Titan lowered his head, his wounded body quivering, a rumble echoing deep in his chest. Then came the faint hiss, almost lost to silence, the unmistakable exhale of smoke grenades. Leela's heart jolted. This fog was no weather, it was a weapon. Somewhere in the distance, boots scraped on gravel. The sound was careful,
deliberate, predatory. Cole sagged heavier against her, whisper of breath ragged as blood darkened his shirt. He understood now. They were not running unseen. They were being herded. The junkyard had become a cage of mist, and someone with a badge had the key. The fog was not hiding them. It was hunting.
Elsewhere, Damon Voss moved with the calm arrogance of a man untouchable. His uniform was clean, his badge polished, gleaming like a lie. In dim lamplight, his jaw was sharp, his smile sharper. To the world, he was authority. To the desperate, he was savior. But beneath the mask, betrayal ran deep. Evidence lockers opened at his touch. Bottles of stolen medicine flowed into black markets while children went without. Loyalty was weakness in his creed, and power was currency. Tonight, his prey had slipped the trunk. No matter, he had planned for this. The smoke would choke them, the fog would guide them, and his dogs of metal and shadow would corner them before dawn. Damon carried the weight of a badge not as honor, but as a blade. And somewhere in the fog, a child carried a thread that threatened to unravel him. Lila's steps slowed as she recalled Evelyn's shallow cough, the empty bottles of medicine on the shelf. Her grandmother's illness had forced her deeper into the junkyard each day, searching for scraps that could be traded for bread, or, if fortune allowed, a vial of relief. Cole's battered voice broke the silence, naming the brand of the missing pills. His eyes, bruised and bloodshot, locked on hers. He had seen them before, in evidence lockers, seized in raids, stored for safekeeping, but they had vanished, reappearing in alleys and on shelves where they did not belong. The connection stabbed sharper than hunger. The same corruption that left a man bleeding in a trunk was the reason her grandmother coughed at night. Her survival was not separate from his betrayal. It was born from it. The sickness at home and the badge in the fog were the same wound.
The outline of a warehouse loomed from the fog, its roof sagging, windows shattered, door groaning on rusted hinges. Inside, shadows stretched across broken machinery, shafts of moonlight cutting silver scars across the floor. For a moment, it felt like sanctuary, a roof against the cold. Cole collapsed against a steel beam, his ribs jerking with each breath. Titan sank beside him, trembling but steadfast. Lila crouched nearby, her small hands raw and bleeding, clutching scraps of rope she had torn free. Ash pressed close to her legs, growling low, ears flicking toward the door. The air inside smelled of dust and rust, the silence heavy as a held breath. Then came the creak of bootsteps. Not hurried, not frantic. Calm, deliberate. The hunters had followed. The warehouse was not sanctuary. It was a cage with walls wide enough to hold betrayal itself. The door groaned wider, fog slipping inside in ribbons. A beam of white light cut through the dark, scattering dust in silver storms. Then came the shadow behind it. Damon Voss stepped forward, his badge gleaming, uniform crisp, his smile curving cold in the glow. At his side loomed Rook, scarred, gaunt, a predator wearing human skin. Their presence filled the warehouse with poison, each step slow, confident, assured of victory. To Damon, the child in the shadows was not threat, but nuisance. To Lila, the sight of his badge was worse than the cold. Authority twisted into corruption, the symbol that had carved sickness into her home. Cole gripped a rusted pipe with trembling hands, his body broken but spirit unbowed. Titan crouched low, lips curled over bloodied teeth. Ash bristled ahead of Lila. The hunters had arrived, and the cage was now fully closed.
Damon's voice filled the cavernous space like smoke, smooth, mocking, edged with venom. He spoke of the badge not as honor, but as currency.
In his creed, the uniform was not an oath, but a key, unlocking doors, silencing witnesses, buying silence where loyalty once lived. He laughed at the thought of men clinging to moral codes, of officers dying for ideals instead of profits. Each word dripped like oil into the dust, tainting the silence. Cole's knuckles whitened around the pipe, blood dripping down his arm, but he held his ground. Titan's growl vibrated through the concrete, ash snapping in defiance. And in the shadows, Lila's chest rose and fell too fast, her gray eyes reflecting betrayal she could not fully name, but understood deeper than hunger. Authority had failed. The badge was not light. It was a mask, worn by wolves hiding in plain sight. Silence stretched, suffocating. Then came the sound least expected. A small voice, cracked but clear, rising from the shadows like a knife through fog. It was not a question, not a plea, but a vow. A child's frail body, gray eyes burning with something fiercer than fear, stepped forward into the light. 6 years old, dirt-streaked, trembling, yet defiant against the wolves before her. In her heart pulsed Evelyn's words. In her hand trembled the tool that had freed a man from his cage. The warehouse groaned around her, beams shifting as though holding its breath. Ash pressed at her leg. Titan's muzzle brushed her hand, steadying her. Damon's smirk faltered for half a second, then sharpened again. But the air had shifted. Betrayal had spoken of power, and now loyalty had found its voice in the smallest, most unexpected witness.
Cole staggered forward, pipe raised, ribs tearing with each breath. His vision swam, the floor tilting, blood soaking his shirt. Each step was defiance, but defiance had limits. His knees buckled, body crashing against the beam with a groan that echoed through the rafters. Titan whimpered, pressing against him, urging him up, but even loyalty could not force broken ribs to mend. For the first time since the trunk, Lila realized the officer could not save himself. His body was too far gone, strength spent in the crawl through fog and the fight to stand. The weight shifted. Survival no longer rested on the shoulders of a man sworn to protect. It fell on a child, a dog born in hunger, and a canine bleeding from wounds of service. The cage had no savior left standing. It was theirs now, to break or be broken. The first strike came without warning. Titan lunged, jaws clamping around Damon's arm, the sound of bone and cloth tearing in one violent snap. Damon roared, flashlight scattering wild arcs across the warehouse. Ash darted forward, smaller but relentless, sinking teeth into Rook's calf, dragging him back in snarling defiance. The cavern erupted into chaos. Steel clanged as Cole swung weakly, pipe glancing against shadow. Titan's growl thundered, blood dripping from his muzzle. Rook cursed, kicking wildly, his scarred face twisted in fury. Damon staggered, his badge smeared in crimson, his uniform no longer pristine but torn by the jaws of loyalty. Lila pressed against the wall, heart hammering, screwdriver clutched like a talisman. The warehouse shook with violence. The fight was not orderly, not righteous, but feral. Loyalty had bared its teeth, and betrayal had met its first resistance in blood and steel.
In the chaos, Damon's pistol slipped from his holster, clattering across the concrete, sliding beneath crates and shadows. The sound cut sharper than the growls and shouts, a single metallic promise of death. All eyes flicked toward it. Damon twisted, Titan's jaws tearing deeper into his arm as he reached. Rook staggered, Ash snapping at his heels, his hand stretching desperately. But neither man was closest. Leela, small body pressed to the floor, scrambled forward, her thin fingers scraping across cold steel. Her chest heaved, gray eyes wide as her hands wrapped around the weapon, heavier than anything she had ever held. The pistol dwarfed her grip, its weight dragging her arms down. In that instant, the battlefield froze. A child, dirt-streaked and trembling, stood clutching the power of life and death. Betrayal's weapon had fallen not into a soldier's hand, but into hers. The pistol shook in her grip, its black barrel trembling as her tiny arms strained against its weight. The metal was cold, slick with dust, the scent of gunpowder clinging to it like a curse. Leela's breath stuttered, her heart slamming against her ribs. The warehouse waited, all motion caught in the thin line between survival and surrender. Damon's eyes blazed, blood dripping down his arm, his smirk twisting into fury. Rook froze, Scar shining under the flashlight's beam. Titan staggered, growling through pain, and Ash bristled, hackles sharp as blades. In that fragile silence, the weapon was more than steel. It was choice. A child who should have been playing in fields now stood in judgment over wolves. Her grandmother's words burned in her chest. Knots are cages, and cages can always be undone. The pistol was heavy, but her defiance weighed even heavier.
The silence broke not with a shot, but with breath. Lila's lips parted, her voice thin, trembling, but steady enough to echo through the steel cavern. It was not command, not plea, but truth. In that moment, the pistol was not a weapon, but a witness. Betrayal had the gun, but loyalty had found its voice in a child who refused to break. Damon's jaw clenched, his smirk faltering as he realized the barrel was less dangerous than the vow it carried. For the first time, power shifted without a trigger being pulled. Titan's growl deepened, Ash pressed closer, and Cole dragged himself upright, pipe trembling in his grip. The warehouse pulsed with a fragile equilibrium. Betrayal had bullets, but loyalty, in its smallest vessel, had found a way to speak louder. The cage groaned around them, one step from collapse, one breath from eruption. Then, the balance shattered. Damon lunged, his eyes blazing, fury overpowering control. Titan surged forward, wounded paw buckling, but spirit unyielding. His jaws clamped harder into Damon's flesh, dragging him down with a roar that rattled the rafters. Blood spattered the concrete as Betrayal's grip faltered. Ash darted in, sinking teeth into Rook's arm, pulling him sideways into crates that splintered under weight. The warehouse exploded into violence once more, but this time, loyalty struck first. Cole, battered, ribs on fire, swung his pipe with desperate resolve, the clang of rusted steel echoing like a war drum. Damon screamed, his badge smeared crimson, his polished mask shattered under the assault of loyalty's teeth. For the first time, Betrayal staggered. The wolves in uniforms had met a child, a broken officer, and two battered dogs, and loyalty, bleeding and scarred, had bitten deeper than corruption ever could.
Cole's chest heaved, vision blurred, but defiance held him upright. Each inhale stabbed like knives, each exhale came ragged, but his hand clenched tighter around the pipe. Titan limped against his side, muzzle dripping crimson, eyes burning. Ash pressed at Leela's knees, a smaller sentinel shielding her. Together, the broken rose. Damon staggered, arm torn, uniform shredded, but his fury burned hotter than pain. Rook, scar twisted, tried to drag himself upright, his breath sharp and shallow. The warehouse smelled of iron and rust, the taste of betrayal thick in the air. Cole braced himself between the child and the wolves, every nerve screaming, every scar burning. He knew his body was spent, But loyalty had one last stand left. He would not fall while a child clutched his badge, while 2 dogs bled for him, while betrayal still breathed. The broken had risen, and they would not bow. Blood dripping down his jaw, Cole staggered closer to Leela, each step a war. His hand, trembling, reached into his torn shirt. The badge, bent, scratched, and stained, slid into her small palm. Cold metal met fragile fingers, the weight more crushing than the pistol. In her hand, it was no longer a symbol of authority. It was testimony. Testimony of a man betrayed, of loyalty that had teeth, of survival chosen in defiance. The badge gleamed faintly in the fractured light, not polished, not pristine, but raw with scars. Cole's whisper carried more weight than any bullet. Keep it. Not as command, not as hope, but as vow. Ash pressed against her. Titan leaned close, their amber eyes burning like twin lanterns in the fog. Betrayal had sought to bury loyalty in steel. But in a child's hand, the badge had become immortal witness.
Pinned beneath Titan's weight, Damon spat blood, his smirk gone, his mask stripped bare. His voice cracked with venom, but it carried like prophecy. He was never the only one. The corruption ran deeper, higher, wider than this warehouse. Tonight was not conclusion, but fracture. A wound torn open to reveal rot inside the badge itself. His words slithered into the silence, tainting even the taste of victory. Cole clenched his jaw, ribs screaming, but his eyes stayed locked on the villain. Betrayal was broken, yes, but not buried. The child's hand tightened on the badge, Evelyn's words pressing into her chest. Knots are cages, and cages can always be undone. The warning was clear. Damon Voss had fallen, but shadows remained. Shadows that wore uniforms, shadows that held keys. The war for loyalty had only begun. The badge in her hand glowed heavier with truth. The fog began to thin, slipping out of the warehouse in faint ribbons, revealing scars of battle etched in blood and broken steel. The air was sharp with rust, heavy with sweat. No cavalry came, no sirens howled, no patrol lights pierced the mist. The silence pressed tight, broken only by the ragged breathing of the wounded. Cole leaned against the beam, blood dripping down his arm, his chest heaving shallow. Titan staggered, muzzle crimson, but his head stayed high. Osh circled, growling low, hackles still bristling against unseen threats. And in the stillness, Leela crouched on the floor, badge clutched in trembling hands. She was 6, too small to bear the weight of a symbol corrupted, yet stronger than hunger had allowed. The junkyard outside lay waiting, but inside, the war had left echoes carved into steel and skin. Silence had come, but peace had not.
Lila stared at the badge, its edges sharp, its metal burned into her palm. Her chest trembled, but her eyes hardened. She thought of Evelyn, of the cough that rattled through nights, of the words whispered like scripture. Knots are cages, and cages can always be undone. Betrayal had tried to cage them all in steel and fog, but tonight she had learned the truth. The badge was not safety, it was witness, and she would carry it, even if the world chose to forget. Cole sagged nearby, Titan pressed against his leg, Ash curled close at her side. They were not saviors, not heroes. They were survivors, scarred and bleeding, but alive. Lila pressed the badge to her chest, a vow etched in silence. Hunger had not broken her,
Betrayal had not buried her. She would remember, and memory itself could be weapon enough. Ash pressed closer to her leg, tail low but steady. Titan limped forward, massive head lowering against her shoulder, his breath hot, his eyes soft despite crimson stains. Cole struggled upright, his frame bent, ribs screaming, but his stance protective. Together they formed a circle, child, man, and two dogs. Not family by blood, but by survival. A pack of the broken, forged in loyalty's fire. The warehouse walls loomed wide, but inside their circle there was no room for betrayal. The fog thinned further, revealing cracked windows, beams of fractured moonlight painting scars across their faces. Outside, the junkyard stretched endless, rows of rust and ruin waiting. But inside, for this heartbeat, they were more than prey. They were defiance. They were loyalty with teeth, scars, and trembling hands. The pack of the broken rose together, and in their silence, a vow burned brighter than hunger.
In her mind, Lila saw Evelyn waiting on the porch, shawl pulled tight, breath shallow but warm. She imagined bringing Cole there, imagined Titan stretched at the hearth, Ash at her bedside. But doubt lingered. The road was long, and the shadows Damon spoke of stretched further than this night. Still, the vision burned in her chest, fragile as it was. Home was no longer a place of crumbling wood and patched shingles. It was the circle carved here. Man, child, and dogs bound against betrayal. Hunger still gnawed, cold still bit, but loyalty had teeth and betrayal had bled. Lila pressed the badge tighter, her vow reaching toward the faint dream of safety. She had carried scraps to trade for bread. Now she carried truth, heavier than any sack. And truth, though fragile, was a flame even the darkest fog could not swallow. Outside, faint glimmers of patrol lights flickered through the thinning fog, red and blue bleeding into the junkyard like fireflies lost in gray. The warehouse doors sagged open, the night air rushing in, sharp and cold. Cole leaned heavily on Titan, Ash flanking Lila's side. Their shadows stretched long across rust and ruin as they moved together into the broken night. Lila raised the badge in her hand. Its bent metal caught the firelight of distant engines, glowing fierce against the fog. She was 6, trembling, scarred, but unbroken. Loyalty had not vanished. It had taken root in a child's hand, in a dog's bite, in a broken man's stand. The night would not forget them. Betrayal had lost its mask, and loyalty had found its witness. In the firelight of ruined patrol beams, the badge gleamed defiant, a torch against the endless dark. Cut to black.